a deep dive into Sydney's deadliest crime war. What's up everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're covering one of the most shocking stories to come out of Sydney's underworld in 2025, the brutal execution of former UFC fighter Suman Mokhtarian. This isn't just another crime story, it's a tale that exposes the deadly reach of organized crime networks and how quickly a professional athlete's life can spiral into a nightmare of violence and fear. On October 8th, 2025, Suman Mokhtarian was gunned down in broad daylight in Riverstone, Sydney, in what police are calling a targeted assassination. But this wasn't a random act of violence. It was the culmination of a deadly game of cat and mouse that had been playing out for nearly 2 years, involving one of Sydney's most dangerous crime families, the Alameddine Crime Network. But before we dive deep into the story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because we're going to be covering more true crime content like this. And if you're new here, welcome to the channel where we break down the most compelling crime stories with the respect and detail they deserve. Today's video is going to be intense. We're talking about real violence, real people, and real consequences, so viewer discretion is advised. Let's get into it. Who was Suman Mokhtarian? To understand how this story ends, we need to understand where it began. Suman Mokhtarian wasn't just another name in Sydney's crime headlines. He was a legitimate professional athlete who had reached the pinnacle of mixed martial arts. Born in Iran and later moving to Australia, Mokhtarian built his reputation as a fierce competitor in the octagon. He competed in The Ultimate Fighter, the UFC's reality show that has launched the careers of numerous MMA superstars. While he didn't win the competition, making it onto TUF is no small feat. It represents being among the top prospects in the sport globally. Mokhtarian's fighting style was aggressive and uncompromising, traits that served him well in the cage but may have contributed to his troubles outside of it. Those who knew him described a man who didn't back down from confrontation, whether it was in a sanctioned fight or on the streets of Sydney. But here's where the story takes a dark turn. Like many professional fighters, Mokhtarian's career had its ups and downs. The transition from professional athletics to civilian life isn't always smooth, and for some fighters, the adrenaline rush of competition is hard to replace. Some turn to coaching, others to commentary or business ventures. Unfortunately, some get involved with the wrong crowd. The exact details of how Mokhtarian first became entangled with Sydney's criminal underworld remain murky. What we do know is that by 2024, he was firmly on the radar of law enforcement, and more dangerously, on the target list of one of Sydney's most violent crime families. Friends and family described Mokhtarian as someone who was trying to turn his life around. But in the world of organized crime, your past doesn't just disappear. Once you're in, getting out alive becomes the challenge of a lifetime. A challenge that Mokhtarian would ultimately lose. The Alameddine Crime Network, Sydney's most dangerous family. To understand why Suman Mokhtarian became a target, we need to understand the organization that allegedly ordered his death, the Alameddine Crime Network. This isn't some small-time gang operating out of a few neighborhoods. We're talking about one of the most sophisticated and violent organized crime families in Australia. The Alameddine Network is based in Maryland in Sydney's west and is led by Rafat Alameddine. At their peak, this organization was pulling in an estimated $1 million per week through drug trafficking operations. Let that sink in. $1 million per week. That's the kind of money that buys serious firepower, corrupts officials, and eliminates problems permanently. The Alameddines rose to prominence during the early 2020s, right in the middle of what became known as the Sydney Gangland Wars. This wasn't just business competition. This was all-out warfare between organized crime families, with bodies dropping regularly across the city. The primary conflict was between the Alameddine Network and the Hamzy family, also known as Brothers for Life. What makes the Alameddines particularly dangerous is their organizational structure and their willingness to use extreme violence. They operate like a traditional mafia family with clear hierarchies, codes of conduct, and brutal enforcement mechanisms. Cross them and you don't just get a beating, you get eliminated. The network's criminal portfolio is extensive. Large-scale drug trafficking, primarily cocaine and methamphetamines, extortion rackets targeting legitimate businesses, money laundering operations, and contract killings. They've been linked to dozens of shootings and murders across Sydney, often using sophisticated methods including burned-out getaway cars and professional hitmen. Law enforcement has been trying to dismantle this organization for years. In 2023, they scored a major victory with the arrest and extradition extradition of Masoud Zakaria, allegedly the number 2 in the Alameddine hierarchy. But taking down one member of a Hydra-like organization often just means someone else steps up to fill the void. The Alameddines don't just kill for business reasons. They kill to send messages, they kill to maintain respect, and they kill to eliminate anyone they perceive as a threat to their operations. This is the organization that allegedly marked Suman Mokhtarian for death. The first attempt, February 2024. February 2024 should have been the end of Suman Mokhtarian's story. Instead, it became the beginning of his final chapter, a chapter that would play out over 8 months of fear, paranoia, and ultimately death. The attempt on Mokhtarian's life was brazen, even by Sydney's violent standards. Picture this: Mokhtarian is leaving his gym in Wentworthville, probably feeling good after a workout, maybe thinking about dinner or plans for the evening, normal, everyday thoughts that any of us might have. And that's when a figure approaches him, someone dressed as a food delivery driver. In 2024, this wouldn't raise any red flags. Food delivery drivers are everywhere, part of the urban landscape, the perfect disguise for an assassin. But this wasn't a food delivery. The driver pulled out a gun and opened fire on Mokhtarian at point-blank range. This should have been game over. Professional hitmen don't usually miss from that distance, but sometimes fate intervenes in the strangest ways. The gun jammed. Think about the odds of that happening at that exact moment. Mokhtarian, a trained fighter with quick reflexes, didn't waste the opportunity. He ran and he survived. The would-be assassin fled the scene, probably as shocked as anyone that the hit had failed. Police arrested Noah Tuma in connection with the shooting and charged him with attempted murder. But here's where the story gets interesting and frustrating for law enforcement. Despite having a suspect and despite the brazen nature of the attack, Tuma was eventually released on bail due to insufficient forensic evidence. This is the reality of prosecuting organized crime. These aren't street thugs making impulsive decisions. These are sophisticated criminal organizations with access to lawyers, clean weapons, and the knowledge of how to avoid leaving evidence. Getting charges to stick is incredibly difficult. For Mokhtarian, surviving the February attack was both a blessing and a curse. He was alive, but he was also now a marked man who had embarrassed a professional criminal organization. In the world of organized crime, that's often worse than being dead. From February 2024 onwards, Mokhtarian was living on borrowed time. He knew it, his friends knew it, and law enforcement knew it. The question wasn't if there would be another attempt, it was when. Living under a death sentence. Imagine waking up every morning knowing that someone wants you dead, not in an abstract way, not as a general threat, but knowing that professional killers are actively planning your murder. That was Suman Mokhtarian's reality for 8 months following the February 2024 assassination attempt. According to friends and family, Mokhtarian's behavior changed dramatically after the failed hit. The confident, aggressive fighter who had stepped into the octagon against world-class opponents was now constantly looking over his shoulder. He varied his routines, changed his routes, and became increasingly paranoid about his surroundings. But here's the thing about living under that kind of pressure. It's not sustainable. The human mind isn't designed to operate in a constant state of hypervigilance. Eventually, you start to let your guard down. You begin to think that maybe they've moved on, maybe you're safe, maybe you can return to some semblance of normal life. That's exactly what organized crime families count on. They're patient. They can wait months or even years for the right opportunity. Time is on their side because they know that their target will eventually make a mistake, will eventually be in the wrong place at the wrong time. During this period, law enforcement was aware of the threat to Mokhtarian's life. Police sources later revealed that they had intelligence suggesting the Alameddine network was still actively planning his murder. But knowing about a threat and being able to prevent it are two very different things. Australia doesn't have a comprehensive witness protection program like the United States. Even if it did, Mokhtarian would have had to completely disappear. New identity, new location, no contact with friends or family. For many people, that's not living, that's just a different kind of death. Mokhtarian's final messages to friends, revealed after his death, paint a picture of a man who was trying to stay positive despite the circumstances. He talked about plans for the future, about getting back into training, about moving forward with his life. Whether this was genuine optimism or a brave face put on for the benefit of others, we'll never know. What we do know is that by October 2025, Mokhtarian had been living under this death sentence for 8 months. 8 months of fear, 8 months of looking over his shoulder, 8 months of wondering if each day would be his last. On October 8th, 2025, that question was finally answered. The execution, October 8th, 2025. October 8th, 2025 started like any other day for Suman Mokhtarian. He had no way of knowing that professional killers were already in position, that the machinery of his death was already in motion, that this would be the last sunrise he would ever see. The hit took place in Riverstone, a suburb in Sydney's northwest. This wasn't a random location, it was carefully chosen. Riverstone provided the killers with multiple escape routes, relatively low foot traffic, and the kind of suburban anonymity that makes witnesses scarce. According to police reports and witness statements, Mokhtarian was walking in a residential area when the attack occurred. This suggests he felt relatively safe. You don't go for a casual walk if you think assassins are lurking around every corner. Maybe he thought enough time had passed. Maybe he thought the threat had diminished. Maybe he was just tired of living in fear. The shooting was swift and professional. Multiple shots were fired, ensuring that unlike the February attempt, there would be no miraculous survival this time. The killers didn't take any chances. This was an execution, pure and simple. But what happened next is what really demonstrates the sophisticated nature of this operation. Within minutes of the shooting, 2 cars were found burning nearby. This is a classic organized crime tactic. Destroy the evidence, eliminate forensic traces, and create confusion for law enforcement. The burning cars weren't random vehicles. They were likely stolen specifically for this operation, used to transport the killers to and from the scene, then destroyed to eliminate any DNA evidence, fingerprints, or other forensic material that could lead back to the perpetrators. This level of planning and execution doesn't happen overnight. This was a carefully orchestrated operation that likely took weeks or months to plan. The killers would have studied Mokhtarian's routines, identified the optimal location and timing, secured the vehicles, and planned their escape routes. By the time police arrived at the scene, Mokhtarian was dead, the killers were gone, and the evidence was literally going up in smoke. It was a textbook organized crime hit, executed with the kind of precision that comes from years of experience in violence. The message was clear: the Alameddine Crime Network doesn't forget, and they don't forgive. 8 months after the failed February attempt, they had finally completed their contract. The investigation and manhunt. Within hours of Suman Mokhtarian's murder, Sydney was buzzing with police activity. This wasn't just another gang shooting. This was the execution of a former professional athlete, and the media attention was immediate and intense. New South Wales police launched what they described as a major manhunt, deploying significant resources to track down the killers, but they were already facing an uphill battle. The burning cars had destroyed crucial evidence. There were few witnesses, and they were dealing with a criminal organization that had years of experience evading law enforcement. The investigation team knew they were dealing with the Alameddine Crime Network almost immediately. The sophistication of the operation, the use of burned-out getaway cars, and the connection to the February 2024 attempt all pointed to the same organization. But knowing who did it and proving it in court are two very different challenges. Police sources revealed that they had intelligence linking the Alameddine network to Mokhtarian's murder, but intelligence and evidence are not the same thing. In the Australian legal system, you need concrete proof that will stand up to scrutiny in court. Organized crime families understand this, which is why they invest so heavily in avoiding detection. The manhunt involved multiple police units, including the homicide squad, organized crime investigators, and surveillance teams. They conducted raids across Sydney's western suburbs, brought in known associates for questioning, and analyzed hours of CCTV footage from the area around the shooting. But as weeks turned into months, no arrests were made. The killers had vanished into Sydney's criminal underworld, protected by codes of silence and the sophisticated infrastructure of organized crime. This is the reality of investigating these types of murders. Even when everyone knows who did it, proving it is incredibly difficult. And the investigation also revealed the broader context of Mokhtarian's murder. This wasn't an isolated incident, but part of an ongoing pattern of violence involving the Alameddine network. Police connected the killing to other unsolved murders and shootings, painting a picture of a criminal organization that operates with near impunity. For Mokhtarian's family and friends, the lack of arrests was devastating. They had lost someone they loved, and it seemed like the killers would never face justice. This is one of the most tragic aspects of organized crime, the way it destroys not just the immediate victims, but entire communities of people who love them. As of the latest reports, the investigation remains active, but no suspects have been arrested. The manhunt hunt continues, but with each passing day, the trail grows colder and the chances of bringing the killers to justice diminish. The broader impact: Sydney's gang war. Suman Mokhtarian's murder wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was another casualty in Sydney's ongoing gang war, a conflict that has been tearing through the city's western suburbs for years. To understand the full significance of his death, we need to look at the broader pattern of violence that has made Sydney one of the most dangerous cities in Australia for anyone connected to organized crime. The Sydney gang wars aren't like the romanticized mob conflicts you see in movies. This is brutal, indiscriminate violence that spills over into civilian areas and puts innocent people at risk. Since 2020, there have been dozens of shootings, murders, and attempted assassinations connected to these conflicts. The Alameddine Crime Network sits at the center of much of this violence. Their primary conflict with the Hamzy family, brothers for life, has resulted in a cycle of retaliatory killings that shows no signs of ending. Each murder demands revenge, each revenge killing demands another response, and the violence escalates with no clear resolution in sight. What makes this particularly dangerous is the sophistication of the organizations involved. These aren't street gangs with limited resources. These are multi-million-dollar criminal enterprises with access to military-grade weapons, professional killers, and the kind of intelligence networks that would make some government agencies jealous. The impact on Sydney's communities has been devastating. Residents in areas like Maryland's Wentworthville and other western suburbs live in fear of being caught in the crossfire. Innocent people have been killed or injured in cases of mistaken identity or simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Law enforcement has struggled to keep pace with the violence. Despite significant resources being devoted to combating organized crime, the killings continue. The criminal organizations adapt faster than the police can respond, using new technologies, new methods, and new recruits to stay ahead of law enforcement efforts. Mokhtarian's murder represents a particularly troubling escalation because it demonstrates the reach of these organizations. He wasn't a major player in the criminal underworld. He was a former athlete who got caught up in something bigger than himself. If someone like Mokhtarian could be hunted down and executed, it sends a message that no one is safe. The economic impact is also significant. Businesses in affected areas struggle with extortion demands, property values decline, and legitimate economic activity is displaced by criminal enterprises. The social fabric of entire communities is being torn apart by this violence. As we near the end of this tragic story, it's important to reflect on what Suman Mokhtarian's death tells us about organized crime, about choices and consequences, and about the thin line between legitimate success and criminal destruction. Mokhtarian's story is a cautionary tale about how quickly a life can spiral out of control. Here was a man who had achieved something remarkable, competing at the highest levels of professional mixed martial arts. He had discipline, talent, and the respect that comes with being a professional athlete, yet somehow he ended up as a target for one of Sydney's most dangerous crime families. The exact details of how Mokhtarian became involved with the criminal underworld may never be fully known. What we do know is that once you're in that world, getting out alive becomes incredibly difficult. The rules are different, the stakes are life and death, and there's no referee to stop the fight when things go too far. This case also highlights the limitations of law enforcement when dealing with sophisticated organized crime. Despite knowing who was responsible, despite having intelligence about the threat, and despite deploying significant resources, police were unable to prevent Mokhtarian's murder or arrest his killers. The failure of the February 2024 assassination attempt should have been a wake-up call for Mokhtarian, for law enforcement, and for the community. Instead, it became just a delay in an inevitable outcome. This raises difficult questions about what more could have been done to protect him. For young people watching this, Mokhtarian's story should serve as a stark reminder of the consequences of getting involved with organized crime. The money might seem attractive, the lifestyle might seem exciting, but the end result is almost always the same: prison or death, often both. The impact on Mokhtarian's family and friends cannot be overstated. They've lost someone they love to senseless violence, and they're left with questions that may never be answered and justice that may never come. This is the human cost of organized crime that often gets overlooked in discussions about law enforcement strategies and criminal justice policies. Suman Mokhtarian's story ends where it began, with violence, but unlike the controlled violence of the Octagon, where rules exist and referees can stop the action, the violence that claimed his life was brutal, final, and without mercy. On October 8th, 2025, the world lost a former professional athlete, a son, a friend, and a human being whose life had value beyond whatever mistakes he may have made. His death serves as a stark reminder of the deadly reach of organized crime and the tragic waste of human potential that occurs when violence becomes the primary method of resolving disputes. The Alameddine Crime Network achieved their objective. They eliminated someone they perceived as a threat or a problem, but in doing so, they also demonstrated the kind of ruthless brutality that makes them one of Australia's most dangerous criminal organizations. They showed that they have long memories, patient planning, and the willingness to kill anyone who crosses them. For law enforcement, Mokhtarian's murder represents both a failure and a challenge. They failed to protect him despite knowing about the threat, but they also face the ongoing challenge of dismantling criminal organizations that operate with increasing sophistication and violence. The investigation continues, and there's always hope that justice will eventually be served. But for now, Suman Mokhtarian's killers remain free, protected by codes of silence and the infrastructure of organized crime. As we wrap up this video, I want to remind everyone that these are real people we're talking about. Real victims, real families, real communities affected by this violence. While it's important to understand and discuss these cases, we should never lose sight of the human cost involved. If you found this video informative, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more true crime content. Let me know in the comments what cases you'd like to see covered next. And remember, if you or someone you know is involved in dangerous situations, there are resources available to help. It's never too late to make different choices. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay safe out there.